What's up guys, this is CSB, and today we're back to do a set review for XY12 or Evolutions. I'll be honest, this is the third time I've attempted this. I've had a couple different issues with stuff in the background, and then, just decided not to record my audio last time, so hopefully third time's a charm, because I'm not going to try this again. But anyway, getting onto it, so XY12 is the last set for XY that's going to be out. It's coming out in about a month, near the end of October. That's when the pre-releases and stuff are. What's interesting about this set is that this is like the most nostalgia set, being that this is like, the 20th anniversary and everything like that of Pokemon. So majority of these cards, while they're not like direct reprints, a lot of the art is reprinted, or cards take inspiration from cards from the original base set and things like that, so that's really cool. But anyway, we'll just get right into it. So first up, we got Venusaur EX. Venusaur here is just a reprint from XY base set Venusaur, which is different than the Venusaur that was in Generations, just putting that out there. Not a lot to get to with the Venusaur EX, but Mega Venusaur EX is a little interesting. Probably at least a little bit playable. It's got a 230 HP, which is pretty bulky for a Mega. That's more than Mega Ray and things like that, but not quite as much as Primal Groudon. It's got the attack Crisis Vine. For 3 grass and a colorless, it does 120 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned. So that's pretty good, instant status, no flipping coins or anything like that. It's always pretty strong. Next up, we've got the Caterpie and Metapod line. Not a lot to get into here. Obviously, it's the reprinted art, so it's really, just gorgeous, but there's no Butterfree, which is kind of interesting, and you'll notice that in a couple of these evolutionary lines, they don't finish them, which is kind of interesting. Next up, we've got Weedle and Kakuna. Not a lot going here, just pretty basic, but then we have Beedrill. Beedrill is interesting, and I wanted to talk about Beedrill. It's 120 HP, stage 2, so that part of it's not great, but we're dealing with grass. So we've got things like Forest of Giant Plants to, we don't really have to worry about those evolutionary lines as much as we had to before. We can evolve all turn 1 if we wanted to. But it's got 2 attacks. First up is Poison Sting. For a grass, it does 30 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. And then the interesting one here is Swarming Sting. For a grass and a colorless, this attack does 40 damage times the number of Beedrill you have in play to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Assuming this stays how it is, and there's not like a translation error or an errata, anything like that, like Galvantula, this attack is super interesting. How we're talking about with Forest of Giant Plants, you can quickly get out, multiple Beedrills on your bench and things like that, and the ability to be able to snipe, whether it be to the bench or the active, just depending on the amount of Beedrill you have, is pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I don't know how well or how much it's going to be used, just because that is still a lot of card driving to deal with, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Next up, we've got Tangela. Nothing to go with there. We've got the Charmander line. Charmander and Charmeleon are pretty much just straight reprints from base set. Charizard as well, but Charizard has the benefit of modifying for the current format. Looking at its HP, it's got 150 as opposed to 120 from the original, and then its attack does 200 damage as opposed to 100. It's got the ability Energy Burn. All energy attached to this Pokemon are fire energy. And it's got the attack Fire Spin. For 4 fire energy, does 200 damage. And you discard 3 energy attached to this Pokemon. With that ability, it makes things a little bit interesting. Being able to use things like double colorless if you wanted to, or pretty much anything. Technically, you could splash it in any deck. And, whatever energy you throw on, it's going to work. So that's pretty interesting. Again, it's a stage 2, so being played will be a question, but it's cool nonetheless. Unfortunately, we didn't get the exact American reprint artwork. We get the Japanese artwork, which is still cool, but not as nostalgia. Next up, we've got Charizard EX. Again, this is a reprint, and I want to say this is the same one that was in Generations. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe so. It's got 2 attacks. Wing attack for 3 colorless. It does 60 damage, and then Combustion Blast for 150 damage. Costs 2 fire, 2 colorless. This Pokemon can't use Combustion Blast during your next turn. So again, it's fine. Nothing revolutionary there. It's got 180 HP, so it's a little bit bulkier than maybe your standard EX. Well, somewhat, but probably the more important one here is Mega Charizard EX, which this is a reprint from the Flash Fire Mega Charizard. So it's got 220 HP, so pretty standard Mega. It's got the attack Crimson Dive for 2 fire and 3 colorless. Excuse me, 2 fire and 3 colorless energy. This attack does 300 damage, and this Pokemon does 50 damage to itself. So yeah, it's a lot of energy, but you're one-shotting literally everything. So that is definitely something. It's interesting. Again, it costs a lot, so I don't know how much, if at all, it's going to be used, but it is certainly there. Alright, next up we've got the Vulpix Ninetales line. Vulpix is pretty basic Vulpix. Again, we're dealing with that old artwork, so just looking at it, it's really cool. Next up we've got Ninetales. Ninetales is pretty interesting, so we'll get into that. It's got 100 HP. It's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Abduct for 1 fire. Choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and switch it with his or her active Pokemon. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So it's basically a Lysander effect as an attack, and it makes it to where they can't retreat. So that's definitely interesting. And then it's got the attack Fire Blast, 2 fire and a colorless. It has 120 damage, and you discard 1 fire energy attached to this Pokemon. Not fantastic, but not horrible. It's there if you need it. One shots a Shaman and things like that. Next up, we've got Ninetales Break, which is the interesting one here. It's 140 HP, so a little bit bulkier, but we're dealing with practically a stage 2 at this point because of the break. It's got the attack Explosive Fireball for a fire and a colorless. It does 10 damage, and discard all fire energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 60 more damage for each energy discarded this way. So that's a super interesting attack. You know, it's scalable damage, which is always good. And just by having the fire energy on Ninetales in order to do the attack, so, you know, 2, you're already dealing 130 damage, which is super cool. And you kind of go up from there. So you can take out pretty bulky Pokemon relatively easily. So interesting. Look at that. That's one I think potentially could see play. I mean, obviously, dealing with the stage 2 isn't great, but it has advantages. Alright, next up we've got the Growlithe Arcanine line. Growlithe, I think, is pretty basic. Arcanine's a little interesting. 130 HP, and it's got the ability Burning Road. Once during your turn before you attack, when this Pokemon becomes your active Pokemon from the bench, you may move as many fire energy as you like from your Pokemon to this Pokemon. So, you know, he's bringing all the energy up to him. And that's got the attack Scorching Earth, or Scorching Breath, excuse me, for 3 fire and a colorless. It has 150 damage, and Arcanine can't attack during your next turn. So overall, it's not, like, great, but it's not awful either. If you get it out early, you know, you can start dealing some pretty big damage, but not being able to attack the next turn, it's kind of a problem. I want to say there's an Arcanine Break that this works with pretty well with, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. Alright, next up we've got Ponyta, just a basic Ponyta, no Rapidash. Then we got a Magmar, just a regular Magmar. Next up we've got Blastoise EX and Mega Blastoise EX. Again, these are the reprint ones. This is Rapid Spin Blastoise, 180 HP. It's got the attack Rapid Spin for 2 colorless. It does 30 damage. Switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. Then your opponent switches his or her active Pokemon with one of his or her bench Pokemon. So that's pretty cool. You know, it's got kind of that Dawn fan thing going on, except it's got the benefit of your opponent also has to start switching their Pokemon as well. So, and then you got Splash Bomb for 3 water energy. does 120 damage. Flip a coin. If tails, this Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. It's not horrible. Then we got Mega Blastoise EX. 220 HP. It's got the attack Hydro Bombard for 3 water energy. Does 120 damage. This attack does 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So that's actually pretty cool. It's kind of similar to Primal Kyogre. You know, being able to hit the bench as well. I think it does a little bit less damage than Kyogre does, but it's definitely interesting. Alright, then we've got Poliwag. Pretty basic. Poliwhirl, same thing, pretty basic. It does have the attack Amnesia, which is kind of interesting. This is Poliwhirl. For 2 water, it does 30 damage, and choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. That Pokemon can't use that attack during your opponent's next turn, so if there's something that's definitely like problematic, you can just shut it off for a turn. Obviously, Pokemon Ranger can kind of negate that, but it's still interesting. Next up, we've got Poliwrath, which is another one I wanted to talk about. 140 HP. It's got 2 attacks. Its first is Jumping Punch for 1 water. It does 50 damage. If this Pokemon was on your bench and became your active Pokemon this turn, this attack does 50 more damage. So, we're theoretically doing 100 damage for 1 energy, which is super strong. Next up, we've got Whirlpool for 3 water energy. It does 80 damage, and you discard an energy attached to the defending Pokemon. Again, it's 3 water energy, so it's a little expensive, already on a stage 2. But energy removal is always good. So that's something that could see some play. We've got Seal and Dugong. Not a lot going there. We've got Staryu and Starmie. Definitely wanted to cover the Starmie here. Starmie is pretty interesting. It's got 90 HP. And it's got the ability Galactic Spin. Again, this is a super similar reprint to the base set Starmie, with the exception now it has an ability, but basically what Galactic Spin reads is, once during your turn, before you attack, you may discard 1 card from your hand, then choose 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. You can't use energy cards that were discarded by this ability, so that's super strong. I could see this being in a lot of different decks. Most notably that comes to mind immediately is things like Greninja. You know, you're constantly recycling and discarding energy and things like that to snipe. So I could definitely see that being useful. Then next up we have Starmie Break, which is again another interesting one. It's got 130 HP, and it's got the attack Turbo Star for 1 water energy. This attack does 100 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon Break. Each of your opponent's Pokemon Break. Again, that's very interesting. Unfortunately, we're kind of in a world right now where break cards aren't super relevant. I mean, there's only really 2 that you see right now. It's really only 1, being Xerneas Break. We're not seeing a lot of Greninja Break at the moment, but we're also seeing a little bit of, you know, like Zoroark Break, so that's something to keep in mind. But, you know, if we ever get in a point where breaks are becoming more common or things like that, I could definitely see Starmie Break seeing a lot more play. Next up, we've got Magikarp and Gyarados. I do want to cover Gyarados just because this Gyarados is so bad. I remember original Gyarados was pretty OP back in base, but this Gyarados has 2 attacks. You know, 3 water energy, you have Bubble Beam. It does 50 damage, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. And then its second attack, Dragon Rage. For 4 water energy, it does 180 damage. Sounds good, right? But you have to flip 2 coins. If either of them is tails, this attack does nothing. So basically it makes this Gyarados just straight garbage. There's no reason to use this. Just keep moving. Next up we have Pikachu and Raichu. Interesting note about Pikachu. We're back to chubby Pikachu. So that's pretty fun. And then we got Raichu here. It's got the really cool artwork. But it's got 180 HP. So that's a little significant because I want to say majority of Raichus, like the closed circuit Raichu and everything like that, only have 90. So you're getting a little bit extra. It's got 2 attacks. First up is Discharge for 1 lightning energy. attach a lightning energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. And then it's got Spark Bolt for 2 lightning and a colorless. It does 70 damage. And you may discard an energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do, this attack does 70 more damage. So for 3 energy, you're doing 140 damage, which is pretty cool. You know, and you can accelerate the turn before with discharge and things like that. So it's definitely pretty cool. Next up, we've got Magnemite, Magneton. Not a lot to go into there. Not great. We got Voltorb and Electrode. Definitely want to cover Electrode here. It's got 80 HP, and it's got the ability Buzz Zap. Once during your turn, before you attack, you can knock out this Pokemon and attach it as a special energy card to one of your lightning Pokemon. This card provides 2 lightning energy while it is attached to a lightning Pokemon. It's interesting, if nothing else. I don't know how usable it is. I mean, you're dealing with a stage 2 that, you know, or excuse me, a stage 1 that then becomes a special energy. There's not a lot of lightning stuff floating around, so I don't know where this really fits. There's a card here later we'll get into that kind of works with, but you're kind of reaching at that point. But at least it has that cool artwork, though. That rainbow background. Next up, we've got Electabuzz. Your standard Electabuzz. Old school Electabuzz with Thunder Punch. Then we've got Zapdos. You got 110 HP. It's got 2 attacks. First one, Thunder. For 2 lightning and 2 colorless, it does 90 damage. This Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. And then for 4 lightning, we have Thunderbolt, which does 170 damage, and discard all energy attached to this Pokemon. So, you know, that's, you know, one-shotting a lot of things. Not quite getting there for every EX, but this is the card I was talking about. There's a little bit of synergy. You could use it with Electrode to kind of accelerate, but again, you're kind of reaching there. A couple interesting things about the Zapdos. It has no weakness, so that's pretty cool. It does have a resistance to fighting. Also, just coming from the video game world, it's kind of interesting that Thunderbolt here is dealing more damage than Thunder, but, you know, it is what it is. Alright, next up we've got Nidoran Male, Nidorino, Nidoking. I think it's kind of interesting that they went with this as opposed to Nidoran Female, because we just had a Nidoran Male and a Nidoking in Steam Siege, but, you know, whatever. So again, not a lot to go into with Nidoran and Nidorino, but Nidoking is a little interesting. It has 150 HP, so it's a little bulky for a stage 2. It's got 2 attacks. Its first attack, Tremor, for a psychic and a colorless. It does 40 damage. The defending Pokemon can't retreat during your opponent's next turn. And then Tail Swing for 2 psychic and a colorless. Tail Swing, it does 100 damage. This attack does 20 damage to each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Or, excuse me, benched basic Pokemon. So that's a little relevant. It's a pretty cool attack. Unfortunately, it's only to basic Pokemon. So it's something to look out for. Be a little bit better if it was just Pokemon in general, but, you know. And then next up, we've got Nidoking Break. It's got 180 HP, so you're basically an EX at that point. You know, a stage 3 EX at that, but it's got the attack Toxic Pierce. For 2 psychic and a colorless. Does 120 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and you put 2 damage counters instead of 1 on it between turns. So, dealing with that, you're basically dealing 140 damage, which is pretty cool. But again, it's a stage 3. So it's really hard to get out there. Alright, next up we've got Ghastly and Haunter. Not a lot to get into there. We don't have a Gengar, which is really weird. I feel like Gengar's like idle status from Gen 1 base set and all that. It's kind of interesting that we don't have a Gengar. I know we're getting that Gengar EX reprint, but still. That old school Gengar artwork was really cool. Next up we've got Drowsy with no Hypno. Coughing with no Hypno. Interesting note. This Coughing is Poison type, or Psychic type, excuse me. The original base set Coughing that this is inspired from was a grass type. So, all right, next up we have Mewtwo, excuse me. This is one I definitely want to talk about. This is probably one of the cards I'm the most excited about from this set. So it's got 130 HP, and it's got 2 attacks. Psychic for 2 colorless. Does 20 damage, and it does 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So, just right away, that's a Mega Mewtwo counter. Just a splashable Mega Mewtwo counter, because it costs 2 colorless. And then its second attack, Barrier. It's 2 Psychic. Prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. If any of your Pokemon use Barrier during your last turn, you can't use this attack. So it's kind of interesting as kind of a stall tactic. So not terrible. I don't know how much it'll be used. I mean, you're really using this for Psychic. But interestingly, of all the cards to get, art reprints or, get modified from base set and things like this, this Mewtwo got the best of all of it. The original Mewtwo, I believe, only had 60 HP. This one's got 130, so we're talking about at least twice the HP that the original Mewtwo had. So it's definitely pretty cool. And the artwork's just gorgeous, just throwing that out there as well. Next up, we've got our 600th Mewtwo EX, or at least that's what it feels like. This one has 180 HP, and it's got 3 attacks, and of all the Pokemon that have 3 attacks, this is probably the worst. Its first attack, Energy Absorption. For 1 colorless, attach an energy card from your discard pile to this Pokemon. What's relevant about that, according to the translation we have right now, is it doesn't specify what kind of energy, so theoretically you could get like a double colorless energy. So that's something to keep in mind. Next attack is Recover. For 1 Psychic Energy, heals 60 damage from this Pokemon. Again, it's kind of whatever. It's a worse Pokemon Center lady because it doesn't heal special conditions. And then we've got Psyburn. For a Psychic and 3 colorless, it does 110 damage. So all in all, this Mewtwo EX is not great. Like, it's one of the worst Mewtwo EXs, I think. I mean, the energy absorption attack is pretty cool, but other than that, it doesn't have a lot going for it. Next up, we have Mew. It's 40 HP. It's like super frail. It's got the ability Neutral Shield. Prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's evolved Pokemon. So that's pretty interesting. If only it was a little bulkier, I could see this card, being used a lot more, but just by having only 40 HP, I mean, even with a Fury Belt, that's only 80. It's not great. And then it's got the attack Psyshock. For a Psychic and a colorless, it does 30 damage. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So again, not great. And it has a retreat cost, so retreat cost of 1. So, there aren't a lot going for that Mew there. Next up, we have Sandshrew, but no Sand Slash. And we got Diglett. We'll look at Diglett. It's got 40 HP. It's got the ability Submerge. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, prevent all damage done to the Pokemon by attacks, both yours and your opponent's. So that's kind of interesting. And then we've got the attack Dig Under for a fighting and a colorless. It does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That's pretty cool. Hitting for the bench is always good. Next up, we got Doug Trio. Really not a lot to talk about here. We're just going to skip past that. Alright, now we got the Machop, Machoke, Machamp line. Machop and Machoke, just kind of whatever. Machamp is interesting because A, I feel like I had 600 of these cards when I was 8. Everyone had one of these first edition Machamps. But anyway, it's got 160 HP. It's got the ability Strike Back. If this Pokemon is your active Pokemon and is damaged by an attack, place 3 damage on the attacking Pokemon. That's a super cool ability. Granted, Machamp is a stage 2, but that ability is super cool. It's a mini bursting balloon, all the time. Next up is this attack Seismic Toss, 3 fighting, has 120 damage. Nothing big there. But then we get Machamp Break, which is interesting. Has 190 HP. and it's got the attack Lasso Boomerang for 3 fighting. It does 100 damage during your next turn. This Pokemon's attack do 100 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before applying weakness and resistance. So that's really cool. You know, you're hitting for 100, and you're coming back and hitting for 200. It's really cool. You know, again, we're dealing with, you know, a stage 2 and a stage 3 here, but Machamp is able to be getting out of with Maxie's hidden ball trick, so it's definitely something you could look at. Next up, Onix, just basic Onix. And then we got the card everyone loves to hate from the old school days, Hitmonchan, old Haymaker himself. 90 HP, it's got the attack Jab, everyone knows what this does. 1 fighting energy, does 30 damage, and then Special Punch for 2 fighting and a colorless, it does 90 damage. Obviously that type of deck is not relevant anymore. You know, doing 30 damage just used to be pretty big, you know, for that cheap, but now we're looking at doing in the hundreds of damage for that cheap, so be cool to see that kind of deck come back, but I'm not expecting it anytime soon. Next up is Clefairy. Nothing big there. The only change is this Clefairy is a fairy, obviously, as opposed to a normal type Pokemon. Alright, next up we've got Pidgeot EX. Pidgeot is definitely interesting, and want to look at that one. It's got 170 HP. It's got 2 attacks. First attack, Mimic, for a colorless. If this Pokemon was damaged by an attack during your opponent's last turn, this attack does the same amount of damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So that's definitely interesting. And then Feather Throw for 3 colorless. It does 80 damage. This attack does 20 damage to it. Well, this is translated weird. It says this attack does 20 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. I'm assuming to 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, or it could be 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Either way, that's pretty cool. It's a little expensive, but it's not horrible. Then we got Pidgeot EX, which by far has one of the coolest artworks you're going to see. Just putting it out there. 220 HP. It's got the attack Mach Cyclone for 3 colorless. Does 130 damage. And may have your opponent switch his or her active Pokemon with 1 of his or her bench Pokemon. So you're doing damage, and you have a gust effect, which is really cool. Also, Mega Pidgeot has a free retreat cost, so it's definitely interesting. Alright, next up we've got Rattata. Normally I wouldn't cover this card, but this is kind of relevant. You know, it's got 40 HP, and it's got the ability, and I'm going to butcher this because my mouth is super dry, Facetious Fang. I think that sounds right. But anyway, whenever you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may discard all Pokemon Soul cards attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. It's definitely interesting. This is the kind of card I could see splashed in several decks, just as a Pokemon you want to throw down and, you know, get rid of bursting balloons, fighting fury belts, things like that. And then we've got Eradicate. It's got 60 HP, so that's super, you know, super frail, but it's got 2 attacks. The first attack, Crunch, for a it does 10 damage, and you discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. That's super strong. You know, energy removal is always strong, especially cheap energy removal like this. And then next up, it's Bite from the Shadows. It does 60 damage. This attack does 60 times the number of special energy on your opponent's discard pile, so a little bit of synergy there. If you throw this in a deck, you know, your main focus is discarding energy and things like that. Eradicate could be hitting for big numbers, but so I don't know how super relevant Bite from the Shadows is, because, you know, you've got to get a lot of energy in the discard pile, but Crunch, I think, is super strong. Next up is Farfetch. Nothing to get into there. Doduo, same thing. Chansey, we'll get into Chansey. Chansey, you know, where I was talking about Mewtwo having the biggest upside from going from base set to this set, as far as modernizing and everything like this, Chansey is the worst, by far. It's 120 HP, has 2 attacks. Its first attack, Scrunch, for 2 colorless, flip a coin. If heads, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. It's awful. And then it's got the attack Double Edge for 4 colorless. does 80 damage. 4 colorless. 80 damage. Just absorb that. And, to put a cherry on top of that, this Pokemon does 80 damage to itself. That's garbage. And then, to top it off, it has a 3 retreat cost. Old School Chansey, I think, had a 1 retreat cost, and this one has a 3 retreat cost. Like, it, and I want to say they double edge cost more as well. Like, they just crapped all over Chansey. Next up, we've got Porygon. Not a lot to get into there. Dragonite EX. This is a card that, as of right now, is getting a little bit of hype. I don't know if it's justified or not, but it is getting the hype. It has the ability Elevation. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may search your discard pile for up to 2 basic Pokemon, excluding Dragonite EX, and put them into your hand. It's a pretty cool ability. I know it has been talked about with Rayquaza decks and potentially Gardevoir or Mega Gardevoir EX, so nothing bad about that. We'll see how much it actually gets used. And then it's got the attack Hyper Beam for 4 colorless, does 130 damage, and you discard an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So that's not bad if you have to use it. It's super expensive though. And Dragonite has 180 HP. Alright, next up we're getting into the trainers. Not a lot to get into here, with the exception of it being the old artwork, which is really cool. We've got Super Potion, Energy Retrieval, Potion, Revive, De-Evolution Spray, Full Heal, Switch, Pokedex, Maintenance, Blastoise Spirit Link, Pidgeot Spirit Link, Venusaur Spirit Link, Charizard Spirit Link. What's significant about that is this is the first time we're getting the Spirit Link for Blastoise, Venusaur, and Charizard. And then we've got Professor Oak's Hint, which is an attempt at remaking Professor Oak. But it's a supporter. If you use this card, your turn ends. You draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. So, you know, it's effectively a Tropical Beach effect, except it's a supporter, not a stadium. So, I don't know how much that's going to be played, but we'll see. Then we get Misty's Determination, which is a reprint from, I believe, Fates Collide, but a much better artwork. And we get Brock's Guts. This is a new card. It's pretty interesting. It's a supporter. Shuffle 6 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile back into your deck. So it's a super rod, which is pretty cool. Then we get a double colorless energy. Then we're getting full arts of Venusaur EX, Mega Venusaur EX, Charizard EX, Mega Charizard EX, which is super cool looking, Blastoise EX, Mega Blastoise EX, which has a really cool artwork as well. And then, for some reason, we're getting Pikachu EX, which is the exact same printing of the artwork from the Generations Pikachu box. I don't know why. Just give us a different card, like, give us like Butterfree EX or something, but this is kind of garbage. We just got this card. And then Full Art Mewtwo EX, which is really cool. Full Art Pidgeot EX, and a Full Art Mega Pidgeot EX, which are just beautiful artworks. And then Full Art Dragonite EX, which is really cool. We're getting a Full Art Misty's Determination, which is just a gorgeous card. And then a Full Art Brock's Guts. And I love these supporter cards. They've got that old school blocky trainer writing and everything like that. Super nostalgia for someone like me. Alright, and then we're getting Executor. This Executor is a little interesting. It's super weird, but nothing relevant about it. Except we're not getting an Execute. And I just thought about that. But anyway, this Executor, this was a card that was released kind of like as a promo. I don't know if it ever made its way to the States, though. I know it was a Japanese promo, but I've read that we potentially could not be getting this card here. Could be Japanese specific. Same thing with the next one, Imakuni's Doduo. This card is garbage, but I'm going to read it anyway. When this Pokemon retreats, throw this card away. That's its ability, Frenzied Escape. And then its attack, Harmony. For 2 colorless, it does 30 damage. You must begin to sing a song. When the song ends, this attack does 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Again, these cards are garbage, but it's really fun to look at. And then we've got Here Comes Team Rocket, which is just a straight reprint, artwork and everything. It's a supporter. Each player plays with his or her prize cards face up for the rest of the game. It's definitely interesting. Alright, then we've got some promos that we know that are coming out. First, we've got Slowbro EX, Derpy Derp. Then it's got 2 attacks for 180 HP. That's its HP, by the way. First attack is Slack Off for 2 colorless. Heal 60 damage from this Pokemon. During your next turn, this Pokemon can attack. I don't even know why. Why they even printed that. And then Flash Splash for 3 water energy. It does 100 damage. Next up, we've got Mega Slowbro EX, 220 HP. And it's got the attack. And, you know, I'm not exactly sure how they want you to pronounce this. It's spelled and looks like Lol Roll. It's L-O-L-L. So Lol Roll, I'm guessing. Lol Roll Spin is the attack. Does 100 damage. This Pokemon is now confused. During your next turn, this Pokemon's Lol Roll Spin does 100 more damage. So kind of that same effect as Machamp or Machamp EX or Machamp Break. Excuse me. I don't know. This card's so weird, and just that look. I mean, that's like the derpiest card. Moving on, we've got a Slowbro Spirit Link, of course. Surfing Pikachu. It's pretty cool. And then there's these gym badge promos. There's one of these for every one of the original Kanto gym leaders. So Brock, Misty, Surge, Erica, Koga, Sabrina, Blaine, and Giovanni. They're an item. You flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, draw 1 card. It's kind of interesting. If nothing else, they just look really cool. That's the kind of like when you open your binder, you see a whole page of all 8 of those. And then finally, promo energy. Not promo energy, but foil energy. It's really interesting because this is base set energy, and base set energy was not foil, so pretty cool to see. But anyway, guys, that is Evolutions. Definitely let me know what y'all think about the set. You know, what cards do you like? What cards do you hate? What cards are you curious about? Let me know what you think about the artwork. I love the artwork. But again, I played Pokemon way back in the day when base set was a thing, so super relevant to me. But anyway, that's all I've got for y'all, so let me know what you think. Give me a like, subscribe, and a comment, and I will see y'all next time.